Welcome to the Pro Aging Podcast. I'm Steve Gurney, founder of the Positive Aging Community. We're excited that you can join us for our interactive discussions with pioneers and thought leaders on a wide variety of topics related to aging and longevity. We're able to bring these discussions to you along with copies of the Positive Aging Sourcebook thanks to the generous support of our Positive Aging Community champions. Visit proaging.com to connect with them and find hundreds of resources. On today's discussion, we chat with Nikki Buckelew, Ph.D. and the co-founder of the Seniors Real Estate Institute. We talk about late life move solutions, strategies to creatively talk about moves, and much, much more. So let's jump into the discussion with Nikki. And I have really been excited about this discussion for quite some time since I met Nikki Buckelew. I began sort of seeing the Senior Real Estate Institute out there with our Positive Aging Community champions that are realtors and in this profession. And I was delighted when she was introduced to me a while back. And the first thing I said is, let's get you on because you are truly a wealth of resources. And I want people to know about your organization and what it does and who's a member of it and all of that. And Nikki, welcome. And before we dive into all things moving, downsizing, real estate, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led to you leading the Seniors Real Estate Institute.
Well, thanks for asking. It's always nice to be introduced to like-minded people. I will tell you that it's a mutually admiration club here, mutual admiration club, because when I read through your stuff, I was like, oh, he's one of us. Yay. That's great. So thanks for having me, first of all, and to Jan and Laura over at Capital Senior Solutions for introducing us. So you asked about why I'm doing this and how it started. And I mean, that's a very long story, so I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I'm going to give you the paraphrase version, which is, frankly, we had been selling real estate in our local market here in Oklahoma City for 5 years, and with mature homeowners in mind. We'd been specializing, and we'd gotten really good at it back in early 2000s. And we sold that business, and we moved out of state, and we were just coaching and training real estate agents, running real estate brokerages, and agents started calling me randomly. What felt like randomly had been referred to me and said, hey, Nikki, I understand that you learned how to serve this older adult market and longtime homeowners. How can we do that? And I kept sending them to different certifications and places that they could go and learn. And they'd call me back and say, I still don't really know what I'm doing. Can you coach me? So we started coaching people informally early on, probably, early 2000s. Didn't have a program, didn't have a manual for it. And in the course of coaching people, I kind of created this manual. And a colleague and friend of mine down in Florida, Michelle Moon, she said, Nikki, you need to start doing a class. So we did, and we launched it as a telecourse, and then it grew into a 2-day live course, and then it grew into a certification. And now it's a national movement, I'm going to call it. But Steve, here's the gist of it. You know, my background, my education is in gerontology, my bachelor's, and then my master's in counseling psychology. And then just in the last 5 years or so, I got my doctorate in psychology. And here's why. Because this is not about real estate. This is about psychology. This is about human behavior and people and the challenges that they face. And I thought, oh my gosh, real estate agents don't need any more real estate training, right? They need people training. We need to know how to help people with their problems. And so our course and our training kind of took what NAR had done and what Tim Corliss did way before its time, by the way. Tim Corliss was brilliant back in the 90s when he created the SRES designation. It's just very elementary and very basic. And unfortunately, after Tim's passing, NAR didn't really expand upon it.
Now, what is NAR for folks?
For lay people. Yep. Sorry about that. Yep. National Association of Realtors.
Okay.
And they created the senior real estate specialist designation way back in the late 90s, I believe it was mid 90s. And Tim did that. He was a heart guy, and he created that program because he saw a need as well, just like I did later. But unfortunately, after his passing, that course kind of became stagnant, in my opinion, and it kind of just stayed real basic. And so instead of reinventing the wheel, I basically said, hey, let's make an advanced course. Let's create a master's program in working with seniors. And that's really kind of what we've, tried to accomplish, is to create a higher level training. And that's what we've done. And it's really been cool because people like Jan and Laura and Vic over at the Silver Group and people in your market, we all kind of hang out together in the same circles, because it's not just about real estate, which you can learn pretty much anywhere. It's about how to serve late life moves. It's how to help those people who are downsizing or struggling with the logistics or the emotions associated with leaving their home they've lived in for 30, 40, 50 years. Does that answer your question? I tried to make it as short as possible.
I love it. And so folks, I've just dropped in the website where, if you're not familiar with the organization, you can learn more about it. And that's there for you, and lots of resources, some really good articles. And if you're a real estate professional and you're interested in joining, really easy to get on there and connect with Nikki and what have you. So this is great. Okay, but one of the exciting things for me in these discussions is that our audience is very diverse, that we have older adults and their loved ones, and we have professionals that are trying to help their clients, and I'm sure we have real estate professionals in the audience as well. And but let's face it, we're all here to better serve our clients. So with your background and education and all of that, what I would love to do is let's have a conversation on some of the things that we can help people with who are going through these late life moves. And I don't want you all to think that I just dreamed up that term. Nikki's the one that introduced it to me. She was, we had a little conversation before here, and she was like, this is not about sort of moving. We can't look at people at a certain age and say, oh, they're all the same and what have you. But it's a late life move, and I love that term. And I love not sort of assigning an arbitrary age to the people going through these transitions. So what are some of the words of wisdom that you can give to folks, whether they're listening for themselves or for a client or a loved one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So what you just said about not lumping everyone into one basket, right? So unfortunately, when you listen to commentaries or articles out there, a lot of times, especially in the paper, you'll see seniors as this broad term, and they kind of make everybody sound as if they're going through the exact same life experiences, right? And what we know, you and I and everyone on this call knows, is that everyone's having a different life experience based on a lot of factors, right? A lot of factors. And late life moves are no different. And so the first thing I would say is, there are different reasons that people are in transition as they are getting older. And so let's just say retirement, right? Retirement's a transition in and of itself. And you're going to be talking about that on your next call with your next guest, I think maybe either later this week or next week, which is great. And what happens after retirement is people start to make decisions about where they're going to live. And do I want a smaller house? Do I want to stay where I am? Do I want to move to a resort community? I have the flexibility now of moving around the country to be closer to kids or grandkids or hobbies that they're interested in. And so that's one very unique segment of what I call late life moves, which often is attributed to the boomers right now because of where they are in that transition process, right, Steve? Those are easy, right? Most real estate agents can walk in the door of any one of those clients' houses and say, you know what, this is a proactive move. They're excited about it. They have the wherewithal to complete it. It's not really any different than most real estate transactions, right? But then you have some other types of situations with families that are facing this transition. And you've got, one is, we call this an involuntary move versus a voluntary move. And a voluntary move might be somebody who is in that baby boomer age group or in the downsizers age group. And they say, I'm going to do this because it sounds great. But there's also a group who says, I'm not really going to move because this sounds like something I really want to do, but I know I'm probably going to need to do this at some point. So better now than later, right? They're still doing it. They're still doing it of their own volition. And it's not an enthusiastic move as much as a move of necessity or pre-planning. Then the third one, Steve, and you and I talked about this before the call, was the involuntary move. And this is the one where maybe a person has a health crisis or they're experiencing some cognitive decline, and either the spouse or the kids or someone who cares about them says, you know, we really need to do this. I know you don't want to, but it really needs to happen. And man, those are hard, right? For everybody. Yeah. So when we talk about late life transitions, Steve, we're talking about a lot of different scenarios, right?
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, you said something very important is that, and it applies not just to real estate professionals, but right. It could be elder law attorneys, it could be financial planners, it doesn't matter what the profession. We as professionals know the skills on how to, do X, Y, and Z, but the psycho-emotional and having techniques and things in your tool belt to help people and those difficult, if you're prepared for the most difficult one, and we talk about them every day here, we get folks that are like, Mom, I'm really worried about mom and dad, or mom and dad, or mom or dad, because home is not safe anymore. And I've done everything I can, but I really would like to see her in a better place. The tough thing about that is these are adults, right. And but with the right team and with the right coaching, things can start to become a little bit more clear. Yeah, it's fitting that you have a PhD in psychology, because I tell everybody that, in this field, you need sort of your degree, whatever that is, or your training. And then you also need a degree in social work and counseling. Absolutely. Because that's what, so it really sounds like you're providing real estate professionals with those soft
psychology
skills.
Training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but maybe like what might be kind of interesting is, and I'll say to our audience, if anybody has a real life scenario that they want to share, but it might be kind of interesting for you, Nikki, to sort of share a real life story.
Case study, sure.
Yeah, of a client that either you or one of your members dealt with, and that can enable us to kind of have a discussion, and it also might be able to help some of the folks in the audience that are dealing with some of these issues.
Yeah, sure. Steve, I coach people all the time, both professionals and the people going through this themselves, and so I'm happy to coach people live. I have no problem with that. You're not putting me on the spot at all.
Oh, well, actually, let me cut you off, because Kathy's got a great question that I think we can kick this off. And she says, what do you do if the wife wants to downsize and the husband does not? And this is quite a common occurrence out there.
Very much, yeah. Let's dive into that, because you're right, it's very common. But by the way, just so you know, and Kathy, it can go either way. I have people who the husband wants to move and the wife has got her heels dug in. It usually is the other way around. I'll give you that. My experience has been, but 99% of the time when one spouse wants to move and the other one doesn't, no move happens. They're not going anywhere. But let's talk about the nuances of that. Okay. So actually, that was what my dissertation was on, just so you know. This is like I studied for 5 years on this specific topic, frankly.
Wow.
Yeah. And the reason that I think it's interesting is because what I sought to understand when I did my dissertation was I made an assumption that when I went in and met with couples that were in this scenario, one wanted to move, the other one didn't. And I met with them sometimes for 2 or 3 hours on that first meeting, and then maybe some follow-up appointments, and they're just not going anywhere. And I'm pretty direct in my conversations with people. I have a lot of background in asking hard questions. I don't mind going those places a lot of people don't want to go. But sometimes I got the sense that people were having what I call pillow talk after I left. Like what were they talking about that I wasn't privy to? That's what I wanted to know. So I did this dissertation and I asked, all these people that I interviewed, and I did an interview with the couple, and then I interviewed the couple separately, one by themselves individually, in hopes of finding out, what are you guys really talking about? And here's what I found. They're not talking about it. And so as a result, that was a huge revelation for me, because what I realized is that if they're stuck and they're not able to communicate about this, then nothing is going to change, right? Nothing's going to change. So actually, we launched a program several years back called the Senior Real Estate, or what do we call it? The Senior Downsizing Coach Skills Training, because the basic courses we teach are really about kind of what I consider common issues. These are deeper issues. These are more challenging for people like Kathy. And so what I found is that this is more of a coaching conversation. So let me give you an example of a couple I met with in the past year or so. It was post-COVID, so it was not too long ago. They called us to meet with them because they'd been to one of our seminars. They were curious about possibly downsizing. And 99% of the time, what that really means is my husband or wife wants to move. I don't, but I've agreed to meet with you anyway. Okay, that's what that is. So I'm sitting at their kitchen table. We're having a conversation about what they're thinking and what their goals are, what their needs are. And then it became very evident that she was the one that really needed and wanted to move, and he did not. And this guy happens to be a rocket scientist. Honest to goodness rocket scientist. So brilliant gentleman, highly analytical, very research oriented. She also very smart. She's actually a microbiologist, so also very well educated. They remind me of that couple on Big Bang Theory because they have the same background in education. So when she came into the meeting, she had a walker. She's having a lot of mobility challenges. Their home was very large, very well kept, but you could tell that she was struggling as a homemaker to do what she had done before. So I don't know, let's say an hour or so into the conversation, I said to him, do you realize that your wife is having a hard time keeping the house the way she used to? And he looked at me, and then he looked at her, and he said, oh. And I looked at her and I said, is that a fair statement? I said, you're struggling to walk. I said, you clearly are emotionally, exhausted with caregiving tasks for yourself, but also for your husband. I said, is that really why you want to move? And she said, I just don't think I can do this anymore. And he goes, I had no idea. I mean, it was a moment where I thought to myself, for sure he knew why we were meeting. But he didn't. And it was that moment of clarity. You could see the light bulbs go off above his head. We met for a little bit longer, and I left them with homework. And I said, this is a conversation you guys are going to have and decide for yourselves what you're going to do. But I'm going to tell you that from where I sit, your wife is exhausted. Her body is tired. Her brain is tired. And you guys are spending way too much energy taking care of this big house that you don't need anymore. So think about that. And then let me know when you'd like to meet again. And lo and behold, they did have the conversation. They did get together. He still didn't really want to move, but he loved his wife. And he recognized the problem that he hadn't recognized before. And it didn't take them much longer, about 6 months or so, before they did decide to finally make a move. And it wasn't easy. Physically, it wasn't easy. They didn't really want to get rid of their stuff, which is also another big problem we have. But they did it. And they did it because they knew if they didn't do it now, it was not going to get easier. It was not going to get easier.
Man, great feedback. And just sometimes the things that are staring right in front of you, and I'm thinking about, as you told that story, and Kathy, I hope you thought that was helpful, because I actually thought it was very helpful. There's certain topics that when I'm talking about them with my wife, that when we're alone, we cannot have a civil conversation because we're both so emotionally charged. And this as you told that story, this is a great eye opener for me, is that the providers that are in this space, realtors, aging life care managers, elder law, what have you, everybody serves a valuable function in that you're experts in an area, but also you can sort of serve as a mediator to have a civil discussion on what can be a very emotional and difficult challenge, and maybe get it to the point where now we can sit at the kitchen table and talk about, okay, let's look at these scenarios if we leave this home. That was a great story. And thanks, Kathy, for bringing that up, because that one comes up so much. Now, one of the things that I have discovered, and one of the reasons why we've got these discussions coming up on what to do with our stuff is that we do get so emotionally attached to that home that we raised our kids in, and we had all the Thanksgiving dinners in, and it's not practical anymore, but it's really hard to communicate to someone that it's worth it just to get out and explore other options. You might be surprised.
Steve, what you bring up is a great point. And most of the time when someone, whether they're widowed or divorced or single or married, it makes no difference. If they are attached to the history, the memories, the nostalgia of the family, that is one piece of it. And I think that's the one most of us identify as problematic, because that's the one that the person usually says, we've had all of our Christmases here, and that's where the tree goes, and where will we have Christmas if we don't do it here, right? That kind of thing. But I'm going to point out something that a lot of people miss. And I call it the deeper issue. It's part of our advanced program, and we talk about what are the deeper issues. And what are the deeper issues in that scenario is not, I'm not going to have these memories anymore, because you can easily overcome that by saying memories go with you, right? Of course they do. They know that. But here's the real problem, is the fear of the future. It's the fear of, if we don't stay here in this house, will my family even get together for Christmas? If we give up this 4-bedroom house that we don't need anymore, with the 3 extra bedrooms upstairs, all allocated to the 3 children who live in other states, there is no chance, even though right now they only come once a year, there will be no chance that they'll come if we move into an apartment at a senior community. And it's only that itsy bitsy small chance that they're holding out on that is causing them to not want to move. The pain of moving is worse than the pain and expense of staying. Man. So I don't deal with the surface issues anymore. I used to, that's all you had to deal with. So nowadays what I do is I go, well, you know what? I understand. that you're concerned about where you'll have Christmas, but what's the real concern? Like, what is it that you're really fearing? And, you know, a lot of times, you guys, here's the fear. It's the fear of the unknown, right? Most of us on this call today would not pack their bags and move someplace without having done their ample research, right? Without having gone there, visited it, done their Google homework, all of that stuff. And yet we are asking longtime homeowners who are, let's say, in their 80s and have lived in the same house for 50 or 60 years, we're asking them to sell everything they own, pack their bags, and move someplace they have never even researched.
Man.
We're asking them to do something we would never do. I mean, we don't take our kids. I guess most of the people on this call, if they had kids that went to college, they did not graduate high school on a Friday. And then on Monday, you put them in the car, drove them to the state university and dropped them off and said, good luck with that. Nobody did that. And yet we ask our aging parents to do that every single day.
I love that because I came to that realization when people about 13 years ago, when people called me the senior housing expert, that I'd never spent the night in a senior community. So I moved in and I lived in 5 of them. But I also like your analogy to college, because I always bring that up when we talk about this, especially talk about, let's say that you've decided that you're going to leave, you're thinking about moving out of the home, you're doing some research on senior living communities. I always tell people is you know, try to imagine that you're picking the next college you're going to go to, because a college kid, when he walks onto a campus, he doesn't worry about granite countertops and square footage of the dorm room. He's looking at the lifestyle and the other students and the faculty and all that type of stuff. And that's what makes this transition very difficult too, is because you've got a real estate transaction over here where you might be selling the family home, but what you're buying into is a little bit real estate, but way more lifestyle, peace of mind, experience, community, and all that.
Well, and you know, Steve, to that point, I see adult children that are trying to talk with their parents about making this move, and also see it in senior living community marketing people as well from time to time, not as much. But what they try to do is sell this person on the lifestyle. Now, if this is a voluntary move, yes, they're moving to a resort community, upscale CCRC, a highly active recreational community, and they're doing it for that purpose, then yes, you have to sell all those amenities. But if you're talking to my dad, who absolutely has no desire to move whatsoever and says, I'm going to die in my home and they're going to carry me out in a
this is your dad?
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't he know that you can help him sell his home?
Yeah. And he's not going anywhere, right? Yes. So if you try to sell my dad on how exciting it would be to move to your community or a community near you because of all this cool stuff, he's going to tell you to go jump in a lake, because there becomes a point in our lives where that really doesn't interest us, frankly, right? It's more about your creature comforts and your routine and knowing the people that live around you. That's the other issue. A lot of people say, oh, I want my mom and dad to come live closer to us so that we can help them. And when I'm coaching older adults, which is who my clients are, and they say, my daughter wants me to come live near her or with her, I say, well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't want to live with her. Well, do you want to live near? Well, no, not really. Well, why not? Because my friends are here, right? My church is here. My doctors are here. My car, and I know how to get around in my car here. So I'll say, well, then why would you even consider moving to where your daughter is? Because she wants me to. Well, why does she want you to? Well, I guess because it's more convenient for her if I need her. Exactly. So you need to have a conversation with your daughter. And if you have a plan for living here and you have a community of people around you who can help you, your daughter will be less worried and less concerned and also less obligated, frankly, right? Because you have everything you need. So to me, this is about empowering our clients to create a plan and a community and taking the kids off the hook. Frankly, here's the deal. This is not a selfish statement. This is I don't want my kids. Nobody wants their kids to have to take care of them. Nobody wants that. But very few people actually create an environment where they're not going to need that. Mm-hmm. True story. Yesterday, had a meeting with a lady I'd never met before. She called us a while back, went to one of our seminars, but we were just doing our regular follow-ups. And she happened to tell my assistant, Naomi, that she had fallen recently, and it scared her. And Naomi said, well, why don't you meet with Nikki and just talk and see what you need to do for next steps. And this is a woman in her earlier years. She's in her early 70s. She's retired. She's very intelligent, very capable. And I asked her, so do you have friends? Do you have community? Do you have people that you could call if you fell? Who would take care of Max, your dog? I don't know. I said, you don't really know who you would call? I said, do you have any kids? No. Well, kinda. I said, well, how do you kind of have kids? And she said, I have a son, but we're estranged. He lives in another state, and I don't think I could call on him. And I said, okay, fair enough. So what are you going to do so that if you were to fall and you needed help, what do we need to do to help you create peace of mind that you would have people to call to help you? And that was our first step. This wasn't about moving her or selling her house or any of that. It was about, how do we create a support system for you? And that might mean moving into a community, or it might mean joining our local villages network or a church or a support group where she has people around her that she feels like she could call. So we kind of went down that path, and we kind of circled back to it at the end. And I said, now, based on everything we talked about, does it make more sense for you to stay here in your house or make a move? And she goes, well, I just can't take care of my house anymore. And I said, okay, so that means you want to start looking at options to move. And she said, yeah, I think I'd like that. So now we're going to start looking at communities, and we're going to start talking to the financial people about what she can afford, right? So it's the first step in a process.
Yeah. And, having an objective, person like yourself to sort of guide through that conversation, I think is so important. Yeah. I got a couple of questions I want to address, and I want to share my screen because I want to bring up one thing that you brought up about building your network. Next month, we have a discussion on building your personal village for your solo aging plan. Okay.
Oh, that's awesome, Steve.
Yeah,
way to go.
Because one of the things is most of us, I've never done this until recently, but nobody writes down like all their friends, all their connections, and sort of intentionally looks at their village. It's just, we just do it by accident. And we're going to talk about having a little more intention in doing that. Also, folks, I dropped this into chat. Here's the senior downsizing coach skills training. I think if you hear Nikki chat there, you see how that can be helpful. And just out of curiosity, Nikki, could somebody who is not a real estate professional jump in on any of your training? Because it sounds like it could be helpful for other professions.
This particular training, they can do the training with us. They cannot get the certification. Yeah, but certainly.
Could be just helpful content and give people some skills. And then the other, so now I wanted to address there's a question in chat regarding stuff. And we've got a couple of recordings that I'm going to drop in. We did one the other month about well, here, let me get to the actual question because I want to get your feedback on this too, where they say, how can you move someone to give up their stuff in order not to carry household memories around or in storage? And this first discussion that you'll see on the link that I just dropped in there, was with this unique app, okay, called Artifacts, where you can take pictures and record the memories of all that stuff. And once you do that, it can make it a little bit easier to give up some of it. But then we've also got a chat with the host of the TV show Hoarders, Matt Paxton, and he's got a bunch of tips there too. So hopefully that person, those are a couple of resources there. But you've got such great advice, Nikki. What is your advice for when you get that person and they're on the fence? They want to move, but they can't give up the stuff, or they aren't going to give it up. They're going to move out of their house, but now they're going to spend the price of their mortgage on a storage unit.
Yeah. Well, so that's a very, that's a whole class in and of itself. So let's break it down, because first of all, the only way that the resources that you kind of referenced, where you can digitize things or you can create shadow boxes or you can take pictures, those are only good solutions if the person is actually willing, right? You got to be willing first. And what I find is that once you're willing, there's lots of ways to do this. Like there's no problem. There's great move managers out there. There's wonderful organizers out there. There's lots of people who can help you do this. The problem is willingness. So let's talk about why people may not be willing, because that's the deeper issue, right? Deeper issue. The deeper issue is my identity is tied up in this stuff. Okay. So I'm going to give it a couple of examples. We had some clients that waited until I say they waited too long to move. And when I say too long, they moved to an independent retirement community, lovely place. He passed with about 2 months after they moved. And they had been talking with us for about 4 years. And when they finally moved, it was a reactive move. Now, had they moved earlier, they may have had a different outcome. They may not have. I don't know. There's no way to know. But the thing that hung them up was they had a extensive background as being religious educators. They had an entire room in their house devoted to books and tapes and manuals and all kinds of things. I bet you could relate to that. Yours are all digital books and manuals and interviews now, but right, when you're an educator, you collect things, right? And these folks were struggling to figure out what they were going to do with those things. And no amount of conversation seemed to matter, really. But here's what it boiled down to. If I give these things up, then I am no longer that person. If the engineer gives up his office at his house and moves to a retirement community, the perception is, I don't know who I am anymore. But as long as I'm here and I have these things around me, I know who I am and I'm secure in that. If nothing else in this world gives me solace, I know who I am when I'm here. Okay. So the first step in helping someone let things go, whether it be clothing, ladies, let's face it. I mean, I'm gonna be brutally honest right here, Steve. Men too, maybe, but women are the biggest culprits. You have a closet right now in your house, maybe more than one, that has clothes in it that you have not worn, can't wear, and will never wear again. But you're keeping them because X. And X might be, that's who I was as a professional. That's who I want to be as a professional, but I am not anymore. Or this is who I want people to remember me as. Okay.
Man, you're hitting them all. I tell you what, this is great.
You have to be able to deal with that. And so here's part of the challenge for the business people or the ministers or the helping folks on this call. One of our biggest challenges today is time. We want to get in, do a 30-minute consultation and get out. And you cannot do what I'm talking about in 30-minute increments. You cannot do it. Counselors can't do it. Pastors can't do it. Psychologists can't do it. Doctors can't do it either, but they do. Try. Here's the deal. If you're going to have an in-depth conversation with someone about who they are, who they were, and who they want to be in the future, You had better give up some time for that. You had better plan for a 1 to 2 hour conversation. If you're new to this person, you've never met them before, you're going to spend 30 to 45 minutes just building rapport with them. If you're a real estate agent, you're going to spend another 30 minutes to an hour walking through their house. And then you're going to spend another 30 to 45 minutes talking about what really matters, which is the deeper issue.
Yeah, you're right. We're all looking for a Band-Aid approach, but this is long-term. And that's also where, again, I love everything you're saying. And the funny thing is that Nikki and I, before we had this conversation, I always have this with people that are on, I was like, hey, let's do this first talk, but let's see where things go, because there's going to be some rabbit holes we could dive into. And I love this sort of digging the heels into the sand, and the solutions that you presented to us today are absolutely amazing. And I hope it resonates with folks, the emotional attachment. Sometimes it's just verbally talking about, those items of clothing, and sharing that with somebody else. But the thing that I do like that you said too is that, I mean, we've got hundreds and hundreds of resources in this guide that can help make people's lives a lot better. But for 33 years, I've heard one phrase more than any other phrase. Oh, that's nice, but I'm not ready yet.
That's
and
right.
If you aren't ready yet, that's a great excuse not to have the conversation. And like you said, I think that client that you talked about, that you worked with over 4 years, even though it's a long-term relationship, they are waiting for the Band-Aid approach, and it's never going to happen unless you have a fall or a health problem. And now you got to rip the Band-Aid off, and it's not going to be as pleasant of an experience.
Steve, there are some, what I would consider kind of normative or consistent across the board objections that people will present when they're not ready to do something, right? And this is in most worlds, in the sales world, you guys, we call them obstacles, and there's a script for every obstacle in real estate, and there is no script when you're dealing with older adults. The closest thing I found, Steve, are you familiar with this book? Let me grab it off my shelf. This is David Soley's book, How to Say It to Seniors.
No, I'm not familiar with that. Sounds like a guy that maybe one of our next discussions is you could help me get him on.
Well, if you can get him, he's going through some of his own life troubles right now, in terms of he just lost his brother, and there's some things going on. I communicate with him periodically, but David, I found his book. This is an older book. It's like a 2004 book, I think. Some of the terminology is even a little bit dated since he wrote it. But I'm going to tell you, I use this as somewhat of a Bible now, because he essentially has brilliantly dealt with the five, what he calls the five predictable dilemmas of aging. Okay, 5 predictable dilemmas of aging, or getting older, or old age, however he puts it. And the predictable dilemmas are, do you want me to name them real quick for you?
Yeah, no, this is great. And I'm dropping the link to the book on Amazon onto chat.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So you said this early in our conversation. You said, as professionals, we can step up and kind of be that guide, if you will, for people, right? Regardless of what we do for a living. Well, he calls it a legacy coach. And he says, no matter what industry or career path you've chosen, you are a legacy coach if you work for older adults. So here are the 5. The first predictable dilemma is, no surprise, where will I live? First predictable dilemma, where will I live? Second predictable dilemma is, how can I best manage my health? Okay. Predictable dilemma number 3, how will I cope all by myself? Predictable dilemma number 4, what should I do about money? And number 5 is, what is the right way to say goodbye? Now, those are big, like high level issues. And underneath each of those issues, there are lots of micro issues, right, that we deal with. But he actually, it's like I said, it's the closest thing to a script book I have found. He actually gives languaging for how we do it as middle-agers trying to get our older clientele to do things versus how to approach it with a more mature individual who does not have, by the way, the same agenda that we have, right? Their agenda isn't the same as ours. And so we have to approach it from their perspective.
I love it. You know, even just having a conversation that walks through those elements, I think would be very beneficial to a lot of folks. And that's great. Thanks for turning me on to that book.
Yeah.
I dropped it into chat. Now we've got Kathy, who's been asking a bunch of questions throughout the discussion. Says, where can I find somebody like Nikki to meet with? I believe she could help me. And then Jan says, where are you, Kathy? And she is in Lexington, Kentucky.
Awesome.
So by any chance, do you have a
CSHP in Lexington?
Yeah.
I don't think we do in Lexington proper. We would have to, Naomi's can check on that. But I'll tell you guys what, here's the thing. Our agents, our CSHPs, particularly those like Jan and Laura and those like Vic who have gone through the downsizing coach skills training, they're great on the phone too, right? Like they can help give people some initial guidance as well as myself. If you're, I don't know what Kathy does or what specifically she's looking for help with, but I would encourage all of you to network with people, Steve, like you have in your organization, because we all come to the table with different skills and different things to offer, right? And the more networking you're doing, you'll come across people who may not have my education, but they're just as well read on the topic as I am. And so happy to help in whatever way we can. I want to bring something up too that we didn't really talk about this, Steve, but it's on my heart as we're kind of going through these conversations. And somebody asked me the other day, Nikki, how did you learn all this? It must be from school. And the answer is no, it was not from school. I learned this because just like you, Steve, I am so curious. And so every time you do an interview, Steve, you learn something new, right? Yep. Every time. Not only do you learn something new, but you're teaching all these people on the call what you're learning at the same time. If you're Kathy, my advice to you, Kathy, is that you start doing these interviews with people. And you can record them if you want. I recommend you record them, at least audio record them on your phone, even if you don't video record them. It doesn't have to be fancy like Steve does it or like I do it, but it does provide you with education that you can then turn around and share with other people. If there were hundreds of us and thousands of us out there doing these interviews, that 100 or 1,000 of us that are doing the interviews are just as smart as the people that they're interviewing over time.
Yeah, well, no, what I found, and I forgot this conversation that I had, but it was with somebody like Kathy, who was trying to make a personal life change. Right. And she was talking to me about all these people she was talking to and the little tidbits of information she was getting. And I was just like, oh my God, you are the expert. Like, you know,
people underestimate that.
Yeah. Most people are in one lane, you know, and you're right. If you sort of take that wide field of vision, the sponge mentality, but I would say, Kathy, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Nikki, reach out to anybody on this call today. I would love to help you sort of just, you know, in a half hour, do a little bit of brainstorming and then send you off into a direction. And then what I love it is after I have those conversations, when people come back and they report to me what they have learned. And this is, I know I'm babbling here, folks, but one thing that I'm trying to do this year is put more real life people's personal stories on the pedestal. I've got a gentleman who's lived in a continuing care retirement community for last 7 years, who's going to be coming on shortly. I got a caregiver who's coming on next month, because you don't realize you don't need to be up on stage like me and Nikki to be the expert. Right. When you start making those phone calls, you become the expert. So Kathy, I hope that some of us on this call today can help you. And then I hope that we bring you up on stage and you can talk about how your journey started with this discussion.
Steve, I want to point out the education aspect and how important it is. We've been doing now at live seminars for 8 years in our market. We did them before, we did them a little differently, but now we do them publicly, and we're doing 2 a month now. We were doing 1 a month, and even during COVID, we did them virtually. There are now a couple of dozen of our members through the Seniors Real Estate Institute that also do these types of seminars around the country. And they are education oriented, like what you're doing here, where we do panel events or presentations on different topics every month. And what I've learned is that our older adult audience is so hungry and they're craving information. But they're craving information without an agenda behind it. Mm-hmm. And the problem with a lot of these programs that they go to and they'll stop going to them is the problem. So like, let's say an estate planning attorney does a seminar at a local hotel, and they'll go to it and they'll give them little bits of information, but then they go, okay, if you want the whole story, you have to pay us. Or a funeral planning service who does a seminar and says, okay, now if you want to eat, fill out this form and give us all your information so that we can email and mail and bug you for the rest of your life. And if you don't fill it out, you can't eat. And there are almost always strings attached. So education for education's sake is so important. And so what we've done is, like Steve, like what you've done is we've created these education seminars. And a lot of our people come every month, regardless of the topic, because they learn something, even if they didn't know that they were interested, right? We have about 100 people to 150 people every month that attend at one venue, and about 80 at the other one, because it's all at a hold. And these are folks that are, you said it earlier, not ready yet. So here's the husband and the wife. One of them comes to the seminar because they're curious, but they know their spouse is absolutely in denial. So they come to the seminar, they hear the topic, they go, oh, wow, okay. And then they come to a couple more, and then they say to their spouse, you should come with me to these. They're really interesting. Well, what are they selling? They're not selling anything. Oh, sure they are. Yeah. Okay, I'll come to one, but I promise you they're selling something, right? And then when they come and they figure out that this is a safe place, that they're not selling anything, it's actually really good education, then they begin to come over time. It's a way of building rapport with people that allows them to give you a test drive. Like, do I even like these people? I always say it's funny. People choose their realtor after one meeting at their house, right? A realtor will walk into someone's house, meet with them for 30 minutes, and then ask them to pay them thousands of dollars for their service, and they'll do it. And I think that's crazy. I think that these folks can come and then come to our seminars for a year or 3 years. And by the end of that first few months, they should know if we align with them, if our values align, if our services align, and if they're willing to pay us money to do a service for them. I think that that's an interesting thing to do, whether it's an attorney or a financial planner. Go to these seminars and figure out who you will work with better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Kathy agrees too. With agenda is excellent. That's exactly how I feel about some of this stuff. And that's, folks, I mean, I'm trying my best. I know sometimes we have folks on these discussions and they're clearly, I mean, everybody's selling something, but if you can find the people that are authentically in this market to help people, and if they can help you, they end up being compensated. It's wonderful.
It is. It's a good feeling to know, like, here's the thing, we get paid. Yes, Steve, you get paid, I get paid. But at the end of the day, I get more joy out of people who choose us and hire us because we earned that business, not because we sold them on us, but they chose to work with us because we aligned. And I think in the United States, most people respect that model. What they don't want to be is hounded and email spammed and all that stuff over and over again.
Man, once again, I've just looked at the clock. It's been an hour. This has been absolutely amazing. Many of the people in the comments are just like blown away by your insight and articulation. So we'll put our heads together and I'll get Nikki back on and we can dive into some of these talking points. I want to recognize all the people that are watching on LinkedIn streaming. I sort of missed the comments. I keep my phone open for the LinkedIn stuff, but thanks for joining us. And Nikki, any sort of last closing thoughts on this? I'll make sure to share your contact information with the link to the recording, and the podcast. We'll have it up later this afternoon.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think I really didn't have anything prepared as far as closing comments, but after our conversation, Steve, here's what I would say to the audience. I would say, become a student of successful aging, of positive aging, to use your brand, right? Become a student. We go to school to learn our career path. We go to school to learn a craft of some sort. What would happen if everybody made it their objective to really do a good job at this thing we call getting older, right? And if you're a professional and you work in an industry where you're helping people, then you have two paths. You have your technical path and you have the human path. And if you can combine those two, then you become somebody that won't be matched in your industry. So be both. Be all about being a legacy coach, like David Sully says, and be the best professional in your industry that you can be. And if you do that, man, talk about making a world a better place, right?
Yeah. And then for those end consumers that are, the consumers that are on the discussion today, challenge those providers that you're talking to raise the bar. Like, your questions and your inquiries can help to raise the bar. And I've known quite a few folks that after going through one of these transitions, then it's sort of like, you know what, I'm gonna become a realtor and take the Senior Real Estate Institute course because I had such an interesting experience doing this. Man, well, Nikki, thanks a lot for joining us. And once again, thanks to our community members with all your great questions and comments. All that's recorded. So you can go back and check some of the links, and it'll be on the website later this afternoon. So, all right. Well, folks, we'll see you at the next one. And Nikki, I'll work on scheduling to have you come back.
All right. I'm going to count on that.
You bet. Okay.
All right, Steve.
You bet.